Carbon emissions by the year 2050. The shipping industry puts out about 3% of emissions linked to climate change. Marketplace's Caroline Champlin has that.
To meet the target, the shipping industry will need a new fuel. And no, says Jeffrey Rissman with Energy Innovation, going electric won't work this time.
That's very straightforward for, say, cars. But for ships, they have to go such long distances and times across the ocean where you would need to carry too many batteries, where they would get heavy and bulky.
Ammonia is one potential alternative fuel. The International Chamber of Shipping, that set these goals, wants more research into zero-carbon fuels and proposes a carbon tax on shipping. But Aoife O'Leary with the Environmental Defense Fund says the plan is still short on details.
I can have a target to lose weight, but unless I also do some exercise, I'm not going to get there, right? So I'm more interested in what your steps are to actually get there.
Still, with the right policies, Jeffrey Rissman says he's optimistic.
It is possible, but you'd have to start now.
Because, he says, ships have a long lifespan. I'm Caroline Champlin for Marketplace.
And it's the week that will end with the government's official jobs report. On such weeks, we get a prequel on the Wednesday. Today, a private sector tally of payrolls as processed by the ADP company. It finds there was more hiring than expected in September. 568,000 more people were on payrolls, reflecting a brisk job market in a month that many kids started going back to school, freeing up more wage earners to jump back in. I'm David Brancaccio. This is the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Law Firm.
I'm Wayne Hogan. It's the #1 killer of teens. One text or call can wreck it all. Let's put an end to distracted driving.
Learn more at waynehogan.law.
Baptist Health is a proud sponsor of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Florida is leaving billions of dollars on the table for schools and kids. I'm Melissa Ross. And just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, Florida is the only state in the nation that has yet to draw down billions in federal funding under the American CARES Act for schools. We'll take a closer look. Then later,
the common myth that they are looking at was and they see saw, it's because the hallmark difficulty in dyslexia is they're struggling to sound out words.
Myths and facts about dyslexia and what's possible for both kids and adults with the disorder. Also, actress Mariel Hemingway visiting town, part of our What's Good Wednesdays. That and more all ahead. After the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Biden says he's confident congressional Democrats will reach a compromise over a $3.5 trillion spending proposal. But NPR's Tamara Keith reports the president concedes the domestic spending priorities will probably be cut back over costs.
Pausing under the wing of Air Force One, Biden said Democrats are negotiating the size and scope of a bill that would expand the nation's social safety net, deciding which programs take priority.
It's very important to establish the principle
that, for instance, community college or preschool should be free, or that the child tax credit should be expanded and refundable.
It may be that the child tax credit gets altered in terms of amount, but once it's put in place, even though it's only for several years, it gets harder and harder to take it out. And that's my point to people. You don't have to get everything all at once.
Some programs, Biden said, will have to be means tested, something moderate Democrats have pushed for. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Senate Democrats say they'll also bring up a bill today to raise the government's debt ceiling. This allows the government to borrow money to pay bills on debt already incurred. Senate Republicans have blocked all previous attempts. The federal government will run out of money to pay its bills by October 18th if Congress fails to act. Cleanup efforts continue in Southern California, where a major oil spill has fouled beaches, marshes, and wetlands. Meanwhile, as NPR's Nathan Rott reports, investigators are getting closer to finding what caused the spill.
Divers who observed the pipeline believed to be the source of the leak say it looks like the pipeline, which connects an offshore oil rig to an onshore facility, was dragged across the ocean floor. The operator of the pipeline described it looking like a bowstring with more than 100 feet of displacement in one place. There are reports that a ship may have set anchor in the wrong place, catching the pipeline late last week, but the U.S. Coast Guard and other officials at the spill have not confirmed that being the case. The more than 100,000 gallons of crude oil that leaked, meanwhile, is drifting south along the California coast, causing ecological damage that could last months. Nathan Rott, NPR News.
Pope Francis is expressing sorrow following a French report on the sexual abuse of more than 300,000 children by French Catholic clergy and lay workers. NPR's Silvio Poggioli says the Pope also says he feels shame.
The Pope spoke of his sorrow for the pain and trauma the victims have suffered, and his voice cracked when he added, "I express my shame and our shame over the Church's too long inability to put the victims at the center of its concerns." The 2,500-page report was put together by an independent commission and shows that most of the victims were boys between the ages of 10 and 13.
NPR's Silvio Poggioli reporting from Rome. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
It's 9:04. This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Michelle Corum. Florida Congressman and gubernatorial candidate Charlie Crist is pushing Congress to pass legislation to help the hotel industry. Crist says his Save Hotel Jobs Act will allow owners and operators to apply for a grant that will cover employee payroll and benefits.
Few industries have had the impact felt as deeply as the travel and tourism industry has. But while many subsectors of the hospitality industry have received targeted relief from Congress, hotels still have not.
Crist's bill would also provide a tax credit so hotel owners and operators can buy personal protective equipment. Business travelers are important to hotel bottom lines in Florida. According to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, business travel in Florida is expected to be down by about 60% this year. The COVID testing site in downtown St. Augustine is closing. Flagler health officials say they're ceasing operations because the number of cases in St. Johns County is steadily declining. State Health Department data show the county saw around 600 cases of the virus in the last week of September. That compares to more than 1,700 infections the first week of August. The downtown St. Augustine testing site is going to close tomorrow, October 7th. And we have a cloudy morning, warm too. Temperatures almost at 80 degrees, mostly cloudy and mid-80s, mid to upper 80s this afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering Capital One Shopping, a downloadable browser extension that searches various sites for shoppers. What's in your wallet? More at CapitalOneShopping.com. And the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Florida is the only state in the nation that has not tapped oodles of federal funds for students. Good morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead this hour, a question. Why hasn't the state accessed billions of dollars for federal schools? For Florida schools. Give us a call, 549-2937. Then later, some good news and notes for your Wednesday. But first this morning, Florida, puzzlingly, is the only state in the union that has not filed a plan to draw down billions of dollars in federal funds for schools around the state. On Monday, the U.S. Department of Education sent a letter to Florida Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran asking why his agency has not submitted a plan to get the money. Now, the state received the first 2/3 of the federal dollars, but they failed to provide a plan for how to spend them by the June 1st deadline. And they also blew past July and August timelines for this. Upon approval of the plan, the state would get the remaining $2.3 billion. But here's the thing. Even though the state has already received billions of dollars from the federal government under the American Rescue Plan, this week we also learned that Florida hasn't doled out most of that money. It's only spent a fraction of it. So billions of dollars is sitting in state coffers unspent that could be going to strapped Florida schools. The State Board of Education meets tomorrow in the meantime. Right now, we're pleased to welcome Andrew Spar, president of the Florida Education Association. He's on the line. Hi, Andrew.
Good morning, Melissa. How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for calling. Parents, teachers, everybody, give us a call, 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. Andrew, the press secretary for the governor, Christina Pushaw, sent out a statement about this, saying that Florida has gone out of its way to ensure that districts were not held in harm's way for the funding of students during this pandemic, and that no district has articulated a need for funding that cannot be met with currently available resources. This is the state's response to the news that billions of dollars in federal rescue money is not being spent. What's your response?
Let's start with common sense, right? Because I think anyone who's involved in the public school system, whether they work for the public schools, whether they send their kids to the public schools, whether they observe the public schools, know that Florida's public schools are woefully underfunded. Florida ranks 43rd in the nation in funding for our public schools, and we're one of the wealthiest states in the nation. You're constantly hearing school districts talk about needs. In Jacksonville, for example, you guys passed a referendum so that you can improve the school buildings that are so old and that are in some disrepair because of age, quite honestly, of some of those buildings. You've heard about the struggle to find employees who are willing to come work for, in some cases, literally poverty wages in our schools. And so we've seen a shortage of bus drivers, of cafeteria workers, of custodians, of our paraprofessionals who are the teacher assistants who work by those teachers. And yes, we've seen a massive shortage of teachers in our schools. All of that dated back prior to the pandemic. It's gotten worse during the pandemic. And as you pointed out, the governor is holding literally billions of dollars in Tallahassee, plus the additional $2.3 billion in federal dollars he hasn't applied for. Those dollars can be used to address those needs I talked about, to make sure our students are safe, to add enrichment programs for our kids who have been affected by this constant quarantining that's happened over the last 18 months, and to address the mental health and social and emotional needs of our students who, if you think about it, some of our kids as young as 5 have had 18 months of a not very normal life. And so the impacts on our kids is huge, and we need to be able to support them. That's what this money is for. And when the governor says the districts haven't demonstrated a need, it's because the governor doesn't want to see the need and the requests that districts have, in fact, put in. And if districts aren't guaranteed this money, they're certainly not going to go out and spend it and spend into a deficit. They're not allowed to.
549-2937. We've learned that the state has spent about 4% of what it's received already from the federal government in American Rescue Plan funds. But for the most part, it has not released the money to local school districts. The agreement is that the funds need to go out in an expedited and timely manner. That has not happened. The State Board of Education meets tomorrow. We don't know yet if this will be discussed on the agenda, Andrew, but what is your plausible explanation for why the state hasn't spent the money, it hasn't trickled down to schools, and why it has not applied for the remainder?
I think the question we have to ask is really what is in the best interest of our students and our schools? And when you look at it from that perspective, right, our districts have great needs. They need to make sure that air conditioning units are upgraded and there's air purifiers in our classrooms to keep the air quality at a very high level so we can keep kids and the people who work in our schools safe. We need to make sure that we have the resources to address the shortages of staff that I mentioned. So there's great needs in our schools. When I see a school, as I did recently, post that they have 4 teacher vacancies and 3 paraprofessional vacancies. Again, those are our teacher assistants who work with teachers in a school that's in a fairly affluent community. And then they had teachers out one day and they couldn't get substitutes. Kids are impacted by that. Their learning is impacted by that. They're either being spread out over multiple classes, or there's other people having to come in to cover those classes, which means other services may be missing. That's what we should be focused on. And since districts need the money, the question we should be asking the governor is, what is your motive, as you pointed out? I don't know what it might be, but I'm certainly curious in the sense that this is a governor who's indicated he wants to run for president in 2024 against the current president. And so could that be politically motivated? He's also indicated that he intends to get involved in school board races and has raised about $10 million to do so far. Those are certainly some concerns. Is this somewhat politically motivated? I think it's a fair question to ask. I hope not. And I hope the governor would focus on making sure our schools have what they need. But that's a question to be asked for sure.
5492937. 90% of Florida kids go to public schools. The rest go to charter or parochial or private schools. Lots of tweets about this. Ann tweets the show, "This is absolutely infuriating. Total willful incompetence and an obvious effort to damage public schools." Are you of the mindset that this administration is trying to dismantle or damage public education? Andrew Spar.
Well, I'm not of that mindset. I am worried, though, that sometimes politics plays over what's best for kids, right? And I don't think that's necessarily a willful intent to to destroy public education. I do believe, though, that when you have a governor who's decided to go after school boards over decisions that they are making and take away their ability to really make decisions as to what's best for kids. I mean, we saw it in Jacksonville where, at first the district wanted to put a mask mandate in place. Then the governor came in heavy-handed. They modified it a bit. Then they decided, look, the numbers are too high. We've got to do something. They went forward with the mask mandate. And then you saw penalties being levied against school districts by the governor. You saw threats of removing people from office. You saw all kinds of political actions come into play rather than focusing on what's best for kids and for the people who work in our schools. And so that's the concern I have with all of this. The money that we need, the support that schools need, our teachers and administrators and staff in our public schools have been doing an amazing job through very, very difficult situations. Teaching is hard to begin with. It's super hard during a pandemic. And we should be supporting our public schools and the people who work there and lifting them up and giving them resources and support and not taking things away or threatening them. And unfortunately, that's what this governor has done.
5492937. Jane in Ponte Vedra Beach. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for taking my call. 3 points or comments. Historically, Florida has always moved since Jeb Bush was governor from a public education model to move our tax dollars to private for-profit education. I think it's based upon property tax. When you see that tax bill, see a high payment for property taxes every year, and those retirees in this state feel many times that they've paid for their own kids, let somebody else pay for the kids here, and it's politically astute by the governor to keep our property taxes low. And very last, I think that maybe the governor wants to have Florida just be a haven for the elderly and do everything he can to support that model for the state of Florida. And our DOE is just incompetent in that they haven't delivered a plan for this funds because they are desperately needed for our K through 12 children. It's a true disgrace that Florida looks the way it does in education. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Andrew Spar, what about that? Is getting appropriate political attention paid to schools difficult in a state
with the demographics that we have?
So I would say if you look at what happened in Jacksonville in the last election, it was pretty overwhelming that the community voted to tax themselves for public schools. And that was one of, I think, 27 or 28 initiatives over the last few years that have passed where voters have taxed themselves for public schools. I think the will of the local community is to support high quality, strong public schools so that we can deliver that world class education to every child, regardless of race, background, zip code, or exceptionalities. And what we're seeing at the state level sometimes is that disconnect. That there's the belief that when you get to the state and you're talking about the state budget, the will isn't there to make sure we're investing the right way and in a powerful way to really spur the economy. Because at the end of the day, strong public schools equal a strong community and a strong economy.
Ben in Mandarin. Hi, Ben. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you so much. And I think, that final point that your guest just made is right on the money in terms of where my beliefs are. It's part of the reason why my family is basically considering getting the heck out of here, because I don't know if I can stand another couple of decades worth of this mess. It's really sad that we're in this situation where politicians, many of whom are perfectly reasonable in one-on-one conversations, are essentially scared of their ignorant constituents who are just following the pack. And, I thought that we lived in a republic where our politicians were meant to push back and share important information with constituents and not just kind of go along with whatever the masses want to do. I think it's a really scary place, and I think the governor is essentially committing malfeasance at this point. That's my comment.
Ben, do you have kids in school here?
I do. I have 3 young kids. They're all in elementary school, and I'm sick and tired of them of their educations and futures being used as pawns in this ridiculous political game.
Thank you, Ben. It is certainly an observation among a lot of voters out there, not all, but many, Andrew Spar, that schools have become political pawns in Florida, whether it's the battles over masking and mandates, whether it's how to allocate this money, which has not been allocated yet. We've all seen the spectacle of people coming to school board meetings to yell and express anger. Sometimes people coming to these meetings for the first time. Sometimes people coming from out of the district or coming to express their anger, even though they don't have children in the school district. And so schools have become a proxy for this culture war. What are your thoughts about that? And how that's affecting Florida? Because as we heard, this voter is thinking about moving out of the state.
Yeah, so I think, we're seeing it across the country, quite honestly, right? This political division, and I call it the politics of division. And I find that the politics of division are driven by a individual or a group of individuals who really can't get what they want on their own merit. And so they try to stoke fear and division when it really doesn't exist or need to exist. And then people get caught up in that. And so what we have to do, I think, as a community and as people who truly care about our public schools, we have to come together in a very real way and talk honestly about what we need in our public schools and how to make sure our public schools are successful. All right? That's where we should be focused on, because there is too much vitriol in the conversations that are occurring at school board meetings where I've been going to school board meetings for well over 20 years, and I've been to school board meetings, and there's no one there but the people who are working in the school system. And then there are some when you saw the most parents usually was when there were awards being given out to students. But now you're seeing a lot of hostility at school boards and at school board meetings. And quite honestly, these school boards do not have the power that some people think they have, because you have a state really where it's been chipped away at. This idea of local control is no longer something that people truly seem to practice or believe in. But the reality of it is the school board members know best, because they're the ones we elect. They're elected and they have constitutional authority and constitutional responsibilities that shouldn't be chipped away at. And that's what we should all stand for, right? This idea that decisions should be made by the people we elect closest to our students.
So the State Board of Education meets tomorrow. What is your plan as head of the Florida Education Association to make an impact on these financial decisions? And what is your response to critics who say that your organization is no longer effective in having a role in driving education policy in this state?
Yeah, so, I would say this, first of all. What we have been doing is regularly having conversations with the Commissioner of Education. We have sent letters to the governor. We actually were the first ones to raise up the fact that he was holding this money back. And I'm glad to see more people paying attention to it now, because the reality of it is it does take everyone coming together to make the kind of change that needs to happen, right? And our public schools definitely need these dollars to make sure we're doing everything possible to keep our programs going and to make sure that every child gets that education they deserve. So that's first of all. Second of all, I would say that, we, as I said, regularly meet with the Commissioner of Education, and in our conversations with the Commissioner of Education, we're talking about what our public schools need. I know there was a conversation earlier by one of the callers about vouchers and charters and what's going on there, but the reality of it is our public schools, as you pointed out at the beginning, almost 90% of students attend public schools. Well, that's what it was before vouchers and charters really started. And what we've seen is people who support that idea, that notions of vouchers and charters, have been working really hard to make those more interesting and more attractive, and trying to undermine some of the work that public schools have going on. And so what we're trying to do is talk more about promoting and supporting our public schools, because when we do, we know we're successful, because parents over and over again choose to send their kids to public schools. And so we know that they're vital in our community. We know that our public schools, help move the economy. They bring people together. I mean, I have a daughter who's in public school. I see a lot of my neighbors at public school events, whether it's the Friday night football game, whether it's the chorus program at the elementary school, whether it's awards day. We see each other all the time in our communities at our public schools. And so that's why they're so important.
There are hurricane shelters, too. In Florida, they have
That's
a
right.
particularly important role for all of us. Full disclosure, in my household, we still have one child in public school. 549-2937. Kristen in St. Augustine Beach. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I am a concerned parent of two middle school children that attend public school. I've been active in PTO as well as SAC. And I would just encourage all these people who are attending the school board meetings, trying to, have their voice heard. I would encourage them to listen to the SAC meetings. I would encourage them, the Student Advisory Committee meetings, because that's where real decisions are made, and I'm thankful for that opportunity through our public schools. I just learned yesterday that there's an 8-point gap. I'm a minority. Minorities.
Okay, we're losing you. Go ahead, Kristen.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I we get the point. Thank you for that, Kristen. Andrew.
Yeah, Kristen, first of all, I want you to know I really appreciate the fact that you have engaged in your child's school, especially at middle school. We typically find parents disengage a little bit as their kids grow up, so they're not as engaged in middle school, they're not as engaged in high school as they might be in elementary school. But we all know that the education of a child really does take a strong partnership between the parents and the school. So for that, I applaud you and I appreciate your engagement. And she's absolutely right. Kristen is right. There are so many ways to be involved and to help shape and form the public education system and our schools. And you can do it through your school level, through the school advisory council, as you talked about, to the PTA or PTO. You can get involved that way. You can sponsor clubs sometimes. There's just a lot of ways to get involved in the decisions in your schools and to lift things up, as well as going through your school board and talking with your school board. But, to the points that have been made, when you go to a school board meeting, know what's really going on and how it's working, and have a story to tell, a vested interest in it. And so, as you pointed out earlier in the show, there have been people showing up at school board meetings that don't even live in the county in which the school board is located, or don't have school students in the public school system, and they're talking about what should happen with those kids. The people driving the decisions about the kids in the public school system should be the parents, should be the teachers on the front line, and the staff and the administrators and the district folks, as well as the school board. That's who should drive what's happening in the school.
A couple of listeners tweeting the show, pointing out that Florida Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran, at a recent speech at the conservative Hillsdale College in the Midwest, hinted that part of his overall worldview around education was to use schools as a proxy in the culture war, and intimating that at a certain point, perhaps so many families would flee public schools that no future administration would be able to put that horse back in the barn. I do see your tweets about that. Okay, David on the west side. Go ahead, David.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for taking my call this morning. We voted on a few years ago for the lottery. I thought most of that money was supposed to go to the schools, so why is the schools not getting the money? What's going on with that?
Sure, David. That question comes up all the time. Andrew, can you explain how that all shook out?
Yeah, so the money does come to our public schools. The lottery money is really used for two main purposes. First and foremost, and the biggest portion of it goes to Bright Future Scholars, which is scholarships for kids who do really well in high school when they go to college, right? It's a scholarship to go to college to help pay for college. That's where the majority of the lottery money goes. And then a lot of it, and then a chunk of it does come down to school districts, and school districts use it in a variety of ways, very often to support music and art and physical education in the schools. But what most people don't realize about the lottery money is, it's a portion of the money, because a lot of the lottery money goes to operations and to prize money, right? So it's only a portion of the lottery spending that goes to our schools. Two, the other part, or I should say B, the other part of it is that when the lottery went into effect, the state actually cut funding to public schools. And so instead of it really being the enhancement that most people thought it would be, it was a little bit of a shell game that went on with lawmakers at that time. And of course, the money shifted. I'll also point out that our public schools have still not recovered from the recession when you account for inflation, the recession of 08 and 09. They still have not recovered from those significant cuts when you account for inflation in today's dollars.
So then, last question, Andrew, what's your plan to lobby the state, pressure the state to spend this money on schools and kids?
Yeah, so being on shows like yours, Melissa, is certainly part of it, because it does take the entire community to say to the governor and to the commissioner of education, get that application in, get this money to the schools. Our schools need this money. Our kids, more importantly, need these funds. That's one. And then two, with the legislature, what we have to address this legislative session is the massive teacher and staff shortages that exist across our state. Over 5,000 teacher vacancies at the start of this school year as kids were returning. Over 4,000 vacancies among our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, our custodians, our paraprofessionals, our office staff. These are real issues that impact every child in our public schools, and we need to address that by making sure we have fair and equitable pay, that we have good working conditions, and trust and support the professionals in the work that they do. And we actually have legislation we are proposing this session and working with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Let's face it, public education should not be a partisan issue. It should be a nonpartisan issue. Everyone cares about our public schools regardless of their political affiliation. And we've got to make sure lawmakers remember that and act on that.
Andrew Spar, Florida Education Association, thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. Have a great day.
Later, some good news and notes for your Wednesday to brighten up your midweek. But up next.
The common myth that they are looking at was and they see saw, it's because the hallmark difficulty in dyslexia is they're struggling to sound out words.
A new local center explores what's possible for people with dyslexia. That's next. Well, it's estimated 15 million children and some 52 million adults in the U.S. have some degree of dyslexia. October is recognized as International Dyslexia Awareness Month. It's a time to talk about dyslexia, share resources, and highlight successes. The Morris Center in Ponte Vedra Beach has just opened in our area. It's a comprehensive center for dyslexia and learning disorders. Its president, Dr. Tim Conway, is a world-renowned brain scientist with more than 30 years of clinical research in dyslexia and other learning disorders associated with difficulties in literacy, comprehension, writing, and math. Now, I spoke with Dr. Conway about the changing expectations of what's possible for someone with dyslexia.
Dr. Tim Conway, good to talk to you. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Okay, let's start by explaining what dyslexia is. There are a lot of misconceptions about it. People think that people that have dyslexia just read words or see words backwards, but that's not right, is it?
Yeah, it's a common myth that they are looking at was and they see saw. It's because the hallmark difficulty in dyslexia is they're struggling to sound out words, and so they're memorizing words by sight. And was and saw look a lot alike, so they're just as likely to guess was as saw as was, because they're really not sounding the words out accurately, and they're just trying to memorize as many words as possible.
Do we know what causes dyslexia?
We have a lot of growing neuroscience information. The number one indicator is it's genetic, means it runs in families, and so kids laugh when I tell them you can blame your mom and dad for your dyslexia because one of them passed it on to you. And then I ask them, do you know who mom and dad can blame? And they're usually like, no, who? I'm like, it's grandma and grandpa, because somehow it came from their genes as well. And then we laugh again, and I say, just like my kids can blame me. So we know it's genetic. It runs in families. And the genetics affect the language processing portion of the brain. It doesn't work differently. It's working less efficiently. So it's not building some of the early language skills that build in the spoken language system first, the foundation accurate in reading and spelling skills that develop later on.
And this is something that ran in your family as well, correct? And that's what drew you to this field?
It is, yeah. I was lucky that I got fascinated by this field. I didn't really recall that I got put through prevention at age 4. I didn't hear about that until I was much older. But it became very clear when around age 19 I went to California and began working with my aunt, who was world-renowned for her work as a speech pathologist in the areas of dyslexia. Her husband was a linguist, and they were working to help children in a private learning center to really help empower kids with dyslexia and other learning disorders to reach their full potential. And thankfully for me, I chose that as a profession at age 19, and little did I know that the genes were quite so strong in my family that both my son and my daughter had or have the diagnosis of dyslexia, dysgraphia, which is the handwriting and written expression, dyscalculia, which are the math struggles, and then sensory processing, which has to do with sensory motor skills and being sensitive to touch or to hearing or to sensations, or to struggle with fine motor skills like handwriting or pencil grip or tying shoes. And then the daughter also had oral dyspraxia. So they got a whole slew of challenges that were passed down genetically. But lucky for them, they were born into a family where we have a lot of expertise and a lot of successful interventions.
Well, and let's be clear, there are a lot of high-achieving, in fact, famous people who've been diagnosed with dyslexia. And it's certainly not an indication of how intelligent a child is. Very bright kids can struggle with this, and often teachers mistakenly think that they're not intelligent and are not good students, but they certainly can be. Can you take parents through
Absolutely.
Can you take parents through the process of getting a diagnosis, and should they go straight to that rather than an initial screening? What should parents do if they suspect their child is dyslexic?
Well, the most important piece is to get the proper diagnosis from the proper trained professional. If you do a screening, typically that means you're with a person who's actually not licensed to diagnose dyslexia. So many of the private learning centers offer a low-cost, and sometimes even call it a low-cost diagnostic evaluation or a learning evaluation, but most of those private entities don't have a healthcare professional who's actually licensed to diagnose dyslexia. So you'll spend money there, but your diagnostic information is only going to be as good as the knowledge base of the person they're talking to. So we commonly refer families to go straight to the psychologist or the speech pathologist, who really are the healthcare professionals that are not only licensed to diagnose it, but they've spent a significant portion of their professional training and professional career understanding it, knowing how to identify it, and then also help directing parents to what's called evidence-based practices, which means treatment programs that have been successfully tested scientifically and are proven to be highly effective, because that's really the ultimate goal. The diagnosis doesn't tell you what to do. It just confirms that, yes, your child has this difficulty in sounding out words. There's 3 parts to the dyslexia diagnosis, which is there a difficulty in reading accuracy? Is there a difficulty in reading rate or reading speed? And is there a difficulty in reading comprehension? If a child, teenager, or adult has any one of those 3 areas of deficiency or impairment, they're technically going to meet the criteria for diagnosis of dyslexia, but you really haven't told them anything they didn't already know. They already knew they were struggling. That's why they came to get the diagnosis. They're hoping from the diagnosis you're going to direct them to treatment that's going to help make the skills not be so difficult and make their reading much stronger.
And as young people struggle with mental health challenges in this pandemic and suicidal ideation, sometimes learning disorders like these can be a contributing factor because they're not properly diagnosed. They affect the child's self-esteem. And you see a lot of that in your practice at the Morris Center, correct?
Absolutely. And there's more and more research papers being published showing that if you have undiagnosed or poorly treated or an untreated dyslexia, you're probably going to experience more difficulties with your self-esteem, have a lower self-esteem. You're more likely to have depression or mood difficulties. You're more likely to have anxieties. And in the extreme cases, there's been a couple of research papers that showed that 89% of teenage suicide notes have the same spelling mistakes as somebody with dyslexia has. Doesn't prove that the dyslexia led to the suicide, but it shows that they may have had some similar learning difficulties that made them feel less competent, less optimistic about their future, lower view or lower estimate of what their intellect is, even though, like you said earlier, it's completely not related to intellect. And it gives them, a lot of strife, a lot of mental health challenges and difficulties.
So the key is diagnosis and treatment. As we talk about, October is International Dyslexia Awareness Month. Check out the Morris Center in Ponte Vedra Beach, just opened. It is a comprehensive center for dyslexia and learning disorders. And thank you, President Dr. Tim Conway. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, earlier this week, a video of Jacksonville Jaguars coach Urban Meyer getting handsy with a woman in an Ohio bar. It went viral, and a lot has happened since then at the Jaguars front office and in the locker room. Sports analyst Josh Torres is following the conversation, and he has an update. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Melissa.
All right, so Shad Khan, the owner of the team, put out a statement about this. What did he say?
Yes, he did. On Monday, obviously, Urban Meyer had to face the media for the first time since the video came out, and had to apologize for his actions and essentially say what his side of the story was. So actually, let's take a quick listen to what Urban Meyer had to say.
I stayed to see the grandkids, and we all went to dinner that night at the restaurant, and then there's a big group next to our restaurant, and they wanted me to come over and take pictures, and I did. And they were trying to pull me out on the dance floor, screwing around, and I should have left.
So yeah, he basically said he stayed behind after they played the Cincinnati Bengals and to see his family. He is from Ohio, and then obviously he went to dinner with them, and then eventually it led to what happened in the video. And Shad Khan basically put out a statement after his apology saying that they had a discussion about what happened, and he wants to keep those discussions private, but essentially said that he's going to have to re-earn the trust of everybody within the organization. This is definitely something, and there have been a lot of, ever since that video came out and since his press conference on Monday, a lot of stuff has come out where apparently there's a lot of problems going on in that locker room where a lot of players kind of feel hurt. I mean, you're the head coach. The fact that, I understand it's a Thursday night game. Your next game isn't until the following Sunday. A lot of time off. You want to see your family. You're in Ohio. You're from Ohio. All your family's there. You want to see them. But honestly, one of the biggest things is he didn't fly back with the team. And
now let me ask you about that. That's really unusual, isn't it?
it's very, very unusual, especially, you just lost your fourth straight game. You're 0-4 to start your NFL head coaching career. Your team's lost their 19th straight regular season game. And I understand he's human. You need to sometimes take a moment, step back, recharge, and get back into it. But you need to, when your team gets on the plane, you're not there, and they're a lot of them are probably looking around like, where's he at? Like, and then the next thing they know, you're all plastered all over social media, essentially getting danced on by this woman who isn't your wife at all. And it definitely, from what we're hearing from sources within the organization, is definitely divided the locker room.
Well, if Urban Meyer has lost the locker room, how can he reasonably continue as coach of this franchise given the long, painful losing streak? Is Shad Khan making a mistake by giving Urban Meyer another chance?
Well, it's and this I do have to give a shout out to one of our news partners, News for Jax, who had an article out yesterday where they spoke with John Phillips about this. And a lot of people have been saying they need to get rid of him, just go ahead and cut the ties. But one of the things he pointed out, and this is the thing that runs sports, is it's money. And with somebody who was as highly sought after as him, he probably has a very ironclad contract where if despite morality clauses that are supposedly within his contract and other things like that, the Jaguars would probably have to fork out a lot of money to get out of that contract with him. And John Phillips himself in that article speculates that might be one of the reasons why they didn't go ahead and get rid of him this week, because of the fact that he probably has stuff within his contract. Now, again, that's just speculation. There is, the details of his contract are not known to the public, so we really don't know. But that could be one of the reasons why they're still holding on. And, I saw one of the biggest things I've seen from a lot of people is, to earn the trust back, when you lose the trust, that really can be a big deal, especially when you're already on a losing football team. The fact that you feel like, hey, I can't even trust our head coach, that could cause a lot of problems. But I saw one person who yesterday I thought hit the nail right on the head is, the players if there's one thing they need to trust some of the players. Trust that Trevor Lawrence is going to be one of the things that's going to drive the success of the locker room and get this team back on track. And you know what? Urban Meyer, the first thing he can do, win a game.
Yeah.
This Sunday they're going to take on the hated Tennessee Titans. It's officially Titans Hate Week. Everybody's just looking forward to this.
Titans Hate Week. Well, let me ask you though, Josh, before Urban Meyer was hired, there were those who said just because someone's successful at the collegiate level doesn't mean they have what it takes to play in the NFL. Those pundits are now saying we were right all along. What do you think?
It's hard to say. I mean, there are plenty of instances. I think one of the most famous instances, and I have to again apologize to Heather Schatz, producer. I'm gonna kind of go into her Miami Dolphins when they hired Nick Saban. This is a guy who was very highly respected and who, honestly, I think as much as people hate Alabama, will say he is one of the, if not the greatest college head coach ever. He took a program that had Bear Bryant and were winning. Then when he left, they really struggled for a while. And now look where they're at now. They're always number one ranked. And he was in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins for a little while, and they were not good. And then there was the famous quote of, I am not going to be the next head coach of Alabama. And then 2 weeks later, he's at Alabama. And Miami Dolphins fans all over still remember that. And I really, when he got hired, I really wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, you know what? Quite often, really successful head college coaches come in and they don't do well. But you know what? This guy's a winner. This guy's taken programs that were almost nothing and turn them into something. Maybe he can sell something to the players and really get them turned around. And man, if this is what he's selling, I want a refund, because this is definitely.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about how the demoralized fan base is only now more upset and less likely to support the team, go to games.
Well, see, that you say that, but actually one of the funny things I've seen over the last couple days, actually yesterday really, is I've seen a lot of fans who are just like, you know what? Forget Urban Meyer. Let's go out and support our team and show the other fans that, you know what, you want to keep making fun of us? That's fine. We still love our team. We love Trevor Lawrence. We love James Robinson. We love Miles Jack. We love all of those guys who put on, the Jags jersey every single weekend. Let's forget about Urban Meyer. Let's go out and, again, it's Titans Hate Week. Let's show them that no matter what happens, we're still going to do our best to support this team. And I was actually kind of shocked because exactly what you said. You think a lot of fans would be super demoralized after this, but I've seen a lot of fans who are taking this as, you know what? Let's just go out and have some fun. Let's support our players, and let's pack out TIAA Bank Field and really hopefully finally see that first win for Trevor Lawrence.
Let's hope so. And you'll be in the press box, of course.
Yes, I will.
Following it all.
And I'm hoping to see a really good game, and hopefully, again, really quickly, the team's getting better every single week, and I'm really hoping maybe that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, you know what, guys? This locker room is what we need. These 53 guys on the field, this is all we need. Let's go out there and let's win some games.
Let's win. All right, Josh Torres, our sports analyst. Always good to get your insights.
Thank you, Melissa.
In a moment, actress and activist Mariel Hemingway is coming to town to talk mental health. We'll have a preview and some other good news and notes for your midweek in our What's Good Wednesdays. That's next.
Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com. Announcing Vickers Landing at Oak Bridge, bridging retirees with an all-new Ponte Vedra Beach community, featuring new homes, a resort lifestyle, and a life plan for every stage of aging. Information at vickerslanding.com.
Northeast Florida artists are making noise that's reverberating across the country, and the Jacksonville Music Experience is your ticket to the local scene. Music reviews, curated playlists, music history, concert recommendations, and profiles of local artists, all put together by our team of local contributors. The Jacksonville Music Experience plays it local and plays it loud. Visit jacksmusic.org to read and hear more.
On the next Fresh Air, Fiona Hill. She became famous for testifying at Trump's first impeachment hearing, condemning the false narrative that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the election. She'd served as the top Russia expert in the Trump White House. In a new memoir, she warns we might be headed towards authoritarianism. Join us
today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Nancy Pelosi has never lost a floor vote as Speaker, and she has no plans to start losing now.
Adding up what our priorities are should take us to a number where we find common ground.
The Speaker says that passing the Reconciliation Act will top her time in Congress. But with a legacy and a presidential agenda all on the line, how will this final act play out? We've got the latest next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, activist, actress, and mental health advocate Mariel Hemingway is the keynote speaker this week for the Jacksonville Women's Network's Speakers Forum, a highly regarded signature event open to the public. In her keynote address, Unstoppable, Mariel will share her family's story, from the suicides of her grandfather, Ernest Hemingway, and her sister, Margot Hemingway, to her own personal journey from depression to a life filled with purpose. Mariel Hemingway's presentation and the dinner is set for tomorrow night at the Omni Jacksonville. A few tickets are still available. She gave me this preview.
We are dealing with a mental health crisis in this country, and you've really become a thought leader in this area based on your own family's history, which is pretty well known. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to this, becoming an advocate and a speaker about mental health?
Well, it wasn't really planned because, as you know, you go through your life, you just think, well, I'm surviving what I came from, and until you really dive into the history of your family, you never really know what it means until you've really looked at things closely. So what I did for many, many years, from my teenage years onward, when I was making films and doing my life and getting married and having children, I started to really examine why I had the habits that I had and the fears that I had and the obsessions that I had. And I realized that I was trying to survive a heritage, while wonderfully creative, was also very, very challenging and very scary for a young girl and young woman, thinking, oh my gosh, is this genetic? Is it going to happen to me? And does it happen to everyone in your family? Blah, blah, blah. Whatever those unanswered questions are that kind of lay in your brain, until you've really taken a deep dive into a family situation and your own history, you can't answer those questions. Now, I'm going to be 60 soon. And after so many years, I really understand health and wellness and what it means to be a healthy person, and what the mind requires in order for you to have balance in your life. And so what I'm excited about for this women's conference is that, me being a woman and having been on this journey a long time, I know that everyone deals with something. And I've come to a place where I know there are solutions to imbalances, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. But it takes taking responsibility for one's health.
That's Mariel Hemingway speaking as the keynote at the Jacksonville Women's Network's annual Speakers Forum evening and dinner tomorrow night at the Omni Jacksonville. Get your tickets, still a few left, at jackswomensnetwork.com. And here's some other good news for your week. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority and Gamma Rho Omega Chapter are hosting the Stay Well Community Health Fair and Vaccine event Saturday at the Clansell Brown Community Center on Moncrief. This begins at 10 a.m., free and open to the public. It'll feature Black healthcare professionals talking about the impact of COVID-19 and the emerging variants. Now listen up, they'll have free screenings available, including getting a COVID vaccine, a health screening, a mammogram, and other potentially important health screening opportunities. Check that out, folks. That's coming up Saturday at the Clansell Brown Center on Moncrief. Well, Downtown Vision will host the return of Downtown Art Walk tonight, rain or shine. It'll be coming back with the same tried and true schedule the first Wednesday of each month. There will be three main hubs tonight downtown: James Weldon Johnson Park, the Jesse Bell DuPont Center, and Vagabond Flea at the ViStar Breezeway. Stroll between the three art hubs and visit all your favorite stops along the way. And calling all art lovers and collectors, do not miss internationally known sculptor Diane LaFawn's solo exhibition tomorrow night at 5 p.m. at UNF's Art Gallery in Founders Hall. This will feature a magnificent 6 by 9 foot bronze sculpture themed from the Holocaust, a test installation, and video content from her long and vibrant career. Speaking of UNF, faculty there affiliated with the Digital Humanities Institute and the Africana Studies program, they've been awarded a highly competitive $100,000 National Endowment for the Humanities grant for a project on documenting Black Jacksonville. The UNF faculty will assemble the writings and papers of Viola Muse, a local hair salon owner who worked here from the years 1936 to 1940 as a writer in the Negro Writers Division of the Florida Federal Writers Project. It was headquartered here in Jacksonville at the time. Once collected, these papers will be made digitally available to the public for the first time. Pretty cool. Meanwhile, you can take part today in a racial healing and reconciliation conference. It's on Zoom, and it's sponsored by a slew of local organizations. Here's Dr. Tammy Hodo of All Things Diverse.
And what this really is about is acknowledging that we have had different systems in place for different groups, and acknowledging that equality and equity are different. I hear people often use that term interchangeably, but equality is assuming that we're all starting at the same vantage point, when reality is that that's not the case because of historical policies and practices, whether it be based on sexual orientation, immigration status, or that social construct of race has definitely played a role in the experiences of people in America.
Register for today's virtual event at rhrconference.org and send us your weekly menu items of good news. Drop us a line. I'm Melissa Ross. Thanks for listening. We'll be back at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday, everyone.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO